everyone, I am Kapila here, your English teacher, and today we will take up the chapter, The Best Christmas Present in the World. Now this story has been set up on the background of World War. Now, it's the war happening between the British and the Germans. It's all about human emotions. It's about family. It's about people coming back home from war, people waiting for them, and it's about what are the consequences, what happens. So it deals with all that. Now, let's begin with the chapter. I don't have the textbook, so I have downloaded the chapter in my mobile here. Similarly, you can also download it from the link given in the video. I spotted it in a junk shop in Bridport. A roll-top desk. The man said it was early 19th century and oak. I had wanted one, but they were far too expensive. This one was in a bad condition. The roll top in several pieces. One leg clumsily mended, scotch marks all down one side. It was going for very little money. I thought I could restore it. It would be a risk, a challenge, but I had to have it. I paid the man and brought it back to my workroom at the back of the garage. I began work on it on Christmas Eve. So the narrator here tells us that he really wanted to have the roll-top desk, and on Christmas Eve he brought that roll-top desk from a shop there, and it wasn't in a good condition. It needed a lot of repair, but still he thought that he could mend it. So, and it was coming at a very little price, so he got it from that shop. I removed the roll top completely and pulled out the drawers. The veneer had lifted almost everywhere. It looked like water damage to me. Both fire and water had clearly taken their toll on the desk. So obviously it went at a very low price because it was not in a good condition. It had scotch marks, as if a lot of fire and water, they had done damage to the roll top desk. So while he started the mending work of that desk, he removed the roll top. That is a circle. It is in the shape of a circle, the top of the table. So that he removed, and then he started the repairing. And the veneer is the shiny layer that is there on the top of that roll top, right? Now, the last drawer was stuck fast. I tried all I could to ease it out gently. In the end, I used brute force. Brute force is very, harshly he did it. Forcefully, he took out that drawer. It had many drawers and the last drawer was not coming out. So brutally, very harshly he did it. I struck it sharply with the side of my fist, and the drawer flew open to reveal a shallow space underneath a secret drawer. So there was a secret drawer in it. When he put the fist like this and he shut it, and he found that the drawer came out and there was a place in it. There was something in there. I reached in and took out a small black tin box. Sellotaped to the top of it was a piece of lined notepaper, and written on it in shaky handwriting, Jim's last letter, received January 25, 1915, to be buried with me when the time comes. So he saw that place there, shallow place, and he took out the thing that he saw inside. It was a black tin box, and on the top of the box there was a sellotape, and with that sellotape was stuck a lined paper, and on that paper it was written in it appeared, looking at the writing, he came to know, the narrator, that somebody must have written with shaky hands. Must be somebody who either was trembling or was because of age. You don't know the reason what it was, but it was a shaky handwriting that was there, and it was written that it was Jim's last letter. And when did the letter come to that person, or when was the letter received? It was January 25, 1915. And the letter also said that the note said that it should be buried along with the person when the time came. So when the person would die, the letter should be buried along with him or her. knew, as I did, that it was wrong of me to open the box, but curiosity got the better of my scruples. It usually does. So obviously it is really wrong to open somebody's things and see in the letter, somebody's letter, but out of curiosity he couldn't stop himself, and the curiosity, it hovered him completely. He was overtaken by curiosity, so he opened the letter. And usually this happens when we do wrong just because of curiosity. So even the author or the narrator here did this wrong deed of opening somebody else's letter. Inside the box there was an envelope. The address read, Mrs. Jim Macpherson, 12 Copper Beeches, Bridport, Dorset. I took out the letter and unfolded it. It was written in pencil and dated at the top, December 26, 1914. So, 1914, December 26, the letter was written, and it was received when? January 25, 1915. So, after Christmas, just one day after Christmas, the letter was written, and it came to the person, Mrs. Coney Macpherson. How did he come to know it was Mrs. Coney Macpherson? Because the address was written, 12 Copper Beeches, Bridport, Dorset. Now, this chapter is pretty long, and this is the end of part 1 here. Now, let us do comprehension check questions. What did the author find in a junk shop? So a junk shop is where, you know, old things are kept, and old things, they come for sale over there. And the author found a roll top desk, that also of oak, and it was not in a good condition there. It was very clumsy and had scotch marks and watermarks, and that was what the author found there in the junk shop. Question 2. What did he find in a secret drawer? Who do you think had put it in there? Now, in the secret drawer, the author found in the secret drawer a black tin box with a lined note paper sellotaped on it, on which it was written, last letter received from Jim on January 25, 1915, and to be buried when the time comes. The letter must have been written by the owner of the table, or it must have been written by somebody who received that letter. Now, let us begin with part 2. Dearest Coney, I write to you in a much happier frame of mind, because something wonderful has just happened that I must tell you about at once. So here the reading of the letter has begun. Remember, in part 1 we had read the narrator out of curiosity took out the letter and then he started reading. So he's reading the letter, and this is what we are reading here. We were all standing to in our trenches yesterday morning. Christmas morning. It was crisp and quiet all about. As beautiful a morning as I have ever seen. As cold and frosty as a Christmas morning should be. So beautiful cold Christmas morning, everything is so cold, and it was very quiet over there. So they were all in the trenches. Trenches are, the ground is dug and the soldiers, they hide there in those dug ground, you know, patches of ground which are dug there. So there they were all standing. I should like to be able to tell you that we began it. But the truth, I am ashamed to say, is that Fritz began it. Fritz, the Germans. Okay? So he's very ashamed while he's telling something. He hasn't yet told to whomsoever he's writing this letter. And who is that whomsoever? It is dearest Coney. So Coney is the one to whom he's writing the letter, and he's feeling ashamed to tell that we did not begin it. Whatever he is describing in this letter, whatever thing has happened, he's ashamed that they did not begin the thing. Rather the Fritz, the Germans, they began it. Now let's see what was it that happened. First, someone saw a white flag waving from the trenches opposite. Then they were calling out to us from across no man's land, Happy Christmas, Tommy, Happy Christmas. Tommy is nickname of the Britishers here. The British soldiers, they were called as Tommies by the German soldiers. So they wished Christmas to them. When we had got over the surprise, some of us shouted back, same to you, Fritz, same to you. I thought that would be that. We all did. But then suddenly one of them was up there in his grey greatcoat and waving a white flag. "Don't shoot us, lads." Someone shouted, and no one did. Then there was another Fritz up on the parapet, and another parapet is the ground that was there, the raised ground. On that they came. Earlier they were hiding there in the trenches down. The Fritz, one by one, they started coming up and they asked not to shoot, and nobody shooted them. And one by one the Germans started coming there on the platform that is on the ground there. That was no man's land. Slowly they started moving towards a no man's land. "Keep your heads down," I told the men. "It's a trick," but it wasn't. So he, that is the one who's writing the letter, he must be the leader of those soldiers. So he asked his men to keep the head down because he thought that it must be a trick of those people, and then maybe they would shoot, or because it was a war field. So anything could happen, but it wasn't. So he's very sad about it. That wasn't what he was thinking. That is why he's ashamed also. Later on we'll see why he was ashamed. Some more reasons. One of the Germans was waving a bottle above his head. "It's Christmas Day, Tommy. We have schnapps. We have sausage. We meet you." Yes, by this time there were dozens of them walking towards us across no man's land, and not a rifle between them. Little Private Morris was the first up. "Come on, boys, what are we waiting for?" And then there was no stopping them. I was the officer. I should have stopped them there and then, I suppose, but the truth is that it never even occurred to me I should. All along their line and ours, I could see men walking slowly towards one another. Grey coats, khaki coats. So they were in grey coats, and the Britishers, they were in khaki coats. He was the officer. He should have stopped those people, but he did not, because they were all feeling so good, elated. It was Christmas, and they had given their hand for friendship, for celebration. So they were all happy, and they all said why we should wait, and they all began moving. So all along the line, he could see only the grey coats and the khaki coats. And they were all meeting there. And I was one of them. I was part of this. In the middle of the war, we were making peace. This is very important. It was a war field. And there, such an incident was happening. It was making peace between two enemies. They were enemies there in the war field. But at that time, they were making peace. They were ready to share schnapps. They were ready to share sausages, etc. And they were wishing each other Christmas. So it was happy. You cannot imagine, dearest Coney, my feelings as I looked into the eyes of the Fritz officer, who approached me, hand outstretched. Hans Wolf, he said. So that was the name. He gave his introduction as Hans Wolf. Gripping my hand warmly and holding it. "I am from Dusseldorf. I play the cello in the orchestra. Happy Christmas." So while he introduced himself and he shook hands with the Coney's husband, he said Happy Christmas to him. He also introduced himself that he used to play a cello there in the orchestra, and he had come from Dusseldorf. "Captain Jim Macpherson," I replied, "and a happy Christmas to you too. I am a school teacher from Dorset in the west of England." So he also introduced himself, and he said that he was a teacher there from Dorset, England. "Ah, Dorset," he smiled. "I know this place. I know it very well. We shared many rum ration and his excellent sausage. And we talked, Coney. How we talked. He spoke almost perfect English. But it turned out that he had never set foot in Dorset. He had never ever been to England. He had learned all he knew of England from school and from reading books in English. His favorite writer was Thomas Hardy. His favorite book, Far from the Madding Crowd. So out there in no man's land, we talked of Bathsheba and Gabriel Oak and Sergeant Troy and Dorset. He had a wife and one son, just born 6 months ago. As I looked about me, there were huddles of khaki and grey everywhere. All over no man's land, smoking, laughing, talking, drinking, eating. Hans Wolf and I shared what was left of your wonderful Christmas cake, Coney. He thought the marzipan was the best he had ever tasted. I agreed. We agreed about everything, and he was my enemy. That never was a Christmas party like it. There never was a Christmas party like it, Coney. So he's sharing with the wife how beautiful that Christmas celebration was. The two enemies, they were agreeing on so many things. They shared sausages, they shared marzipan, they talked about various writers and various people whom he also knew, and he had never been to England, but he knew only after reading the books, and he also knew how to speak English, and pretty well he was speaking. So he really enjoyed that moment that he was sharing with that man there. Then someone, I don't know who, brought out a football. Grey coats were dumped in piles to make goalposts, and the next thing we knew, it was Tommy against Fritz out in the middle of no man's land. Hans Wolf and I looked on and cheered, clapping our hands and stamping our feet to keep out the cold as much as anything. There was a moment when I noticed our breaths mingling in the air between us. He saw it too and smiled. Jim Macpherson, he said after a while, I think this is how we should resolve the war. A football match. No one dies in a football match. No children are orphaned. No women are widowed. So this was a big thing that he spoke there. Suddenly from somewhere a football was brought. They made goal post with the help of coats. They started playing, clapping, cheering. All this was happening, and in between that suddenly Hans Wolf said that was the best way of resolving war. Why to kill each other? Why to make the children orphan? Why to make the women widow? And why the people should die? So this was something very intense on which both the teams would agree. Nobody would want war to happen. Nobody would like to kill each other. I'd prefer cricket, I told him. Then we Tommies could be sure of winning, probably. We laughed at that, and together we watched the game. Sad to say, Coney, Fritz won, 2-1, but as Handful generously said, our goal was wider than theirs, so it wasn't quite fair. So what was the result of the match? He was very sadly telling the wife that the Germans, they had won, but Hans Wolf was very generous to say, no, our goal post, that was much more wider than yours, and so it is not fair. Fair match did not happen. So this way everything was going on in a very cool manner over there. They were enjoying. So, and all this was happening there on a war field. That is why he's sharing it with the wife here in the letter. The time came, and all too soon, when the game was finished, the schnapps and the rum and the sausage had long since run out, and we knew it was all over. I wished Hans well and told him I hoped he would see his family again soon, that the fighting would end and we could all go home. So everything ended. Slowly and gradually the match also finished. All the eatables and the drinks, they were all over. They knew now the thing had to end. So now they all wished that the war should end. They should all reach their homes safely. I think that is what every soldier wants. On both the sides, Hans Wolf said, "Take care, Jim Macpherson. I shall never forget this moment, nor you." He saluted and walked away from me slowly, unwillingly. I felt he turned to wave just once and then became one of the hundreds of grey-coated men drifting back towards their trenches. So they bid goodbye to each other, and then Hans Wolf was mingling into the hundreds of coats. There were so many people there, and in those coats, his coat also got mingled, and that was the goodbye between the two, Jim Macpherson and Hans Wolf. That night, back in our dugouts, we heard them singing a carol, and singing it quite beautifully. It was still night. Our boys gave them a rousing chorus of "While Shepherds Watched." We exchanged carols for a while, and then we all fell silent. We had had our time of peace and goodwill, a time I will treasure as long as I live. So these are the names of the carols, the songs which are sung on Christmas, this Shepherds and Silent Night, these are the names. And they sang the carols there, and they all knew that this would be the time they would be cherishing there forever and ever. Dearest Coney, by Christmas time next year, this war will be nothing but a distant and terrible memory. I know from all that happened today how much both armies long for peace. We shall be together again soon, I'm sure of it. Your loving Jim. So this was the letter which he read. In this paragraph, he is assuring the wife that he would return, war would soon end, because none of the parties, none of the sides wanted war. Both the parties, both the soldiers, whether the British or the German, they wanted peace only, and very soon he would be coming to him. Now let's do the comprehension check questions. Who had written the letter to whom and when? Jim Macpherson had written the letter to his wife Connie Macpherson on December 26, 1914, because in January 1915 she received the letter. Question 2. Why was the letter written? What was the wonderful thing that had happened? The letter was written because something beautiful had happened on Christmas Eve. That was in a war field, both the armies, that is the Germans and the Britishers, they had come together, they had celebrated Christmas, they had shared eatables and drinks, they played football match, and they all longed for peace. So it was something which was memorable and that could not be forgotten by Jim. Question 3. What jobs did Hans Wolff and Jim Macpherson have when they were not soldiers? So Hans Wolff, when he was not a soldier, he played cello in the orchestra, and Jim Macpherson was a school teacher in Dorset. Question 4. Had Hans Wolff ever been to Dorset? Why did he say he knew it? Hans Wolff had never been to Dorset, but he said so because he had read a lot about England from the books that he was very fond of reading. Question 5. Do you think Jim Macpherson came back from the war? How do you know this? Jim Macpherson must not have returned from war. We know this because of the note that the narrator has found cellotaped on the black tin box, because it said to be buried with me when the time comes. So that means that is the last letter that the person has received, Connie, and maybe till that time Jim had not come. It's a long chapter. We'll do the other parts in the next video. See you then.